with Joshua earlier, and Gerard is very familiar with it. He's written about it on the Select Side of Star City Games in his column. Also, he tweeted the deck tech earlier today, so he knows exactly who and what he's up against.
Though the problem here is that, again, without Force of Will in the list, Gerard is very susceptible to getting locked out early on in the game. For example, a very powerful opening from Joshua on the play involving Chalice of the Void or Trinisphere may leave Gerard with very few outs.
And Josh even mentioned in his deck tech that Gerard Fabiano gave him the list, so Gerard might be hoisted by his own petard.
Now, with that said, there is a lot of things going on in Joshua's list that Gerard does not care at all about. The Ghostly Prisons, for example, not very effective here. The creatures are trivial for Gerard to kill. But he is vulnerable to the early lock pieces. It will really tax his Abrupt Decays if any of those resolve early.
We'll see what Fabiano can put together here. Joshua Taylor flying under the radar a little bit with his Angel Prison deck. Again, we saw it yesterday take down Joe Lissette. Lissette playing Reanimator won't no longer. He'll be playing in a Premier IQ today, as he did not make day 2 of this tournament. But for Angel Prison, a deck we do not see very much in Legacy at all. It is a lockout style deck. If you are familiar with Vintage or familiar with Workshops and that style of Prison deck, and that is what this deck is trying to do as well.
And one of the advantages that this deck has versus other, sort of the mud style decks that we sometimes see incorporate the similar cards, Joshua's deck can beat the board. Often a Delver resolves and the mud deck cannot get it off the table fast enough, but the Angel Prison deck here with copies of Ghostly Prison, numerous removal spells, a lot less vulnerable to a random creature slipping through the cracks and killing him.
Tropical Island is where Fabiano will start round number 12. For Taylor, an Ancient Tomb, and perhaps a lock piece is coming. There's a Mox Diamond. Discarding a Plains. Taylor will take 2. Is it time for something like a Trinisphere? It is. Fabiano going to take a look at his hands. And life may have just gotten very difficult for him.
And this is the opening that I mentioned that could be problematic for Gerard.
Perhaps Gerard will have to cast a Brainstorm in response. He will just go with a Daze. Maybe floating some mana, maybe not. And he won't, so Daze will take care of that. Deathrite Shaman the draw. He will deploy that and pass the turn back. Taylor will draw. He's at 18, of course, from that Ancient Tomb. He'll play a Plains. Gonna go down to 16 now. And here's a Banishing Light. So Deathrite Shaman will leave for now.
But you can already see some of the problems that Joshua's going to have here in the matchup. The remainder of his hand looks to be at least 2 copies of Ghostly Prison, which just aren't effective tools against Gerard. If Gerard's able to blunt the early lock pieces, Joshua just doesn't have a lot of action in the deck.
Taylor will draw Plains. You mentioned the Ghostly Prisons. He does have those in his hand. There is a Plains. And this is a Ghostly Prison. And Ghostly Prison can be good in certain matchups, but this is not the right place for it, as Fabiano's going to play a Brainstorm.
Oh, I think Ghostly Prison right now is an awesome card that people should be playing more copies of, but not for this matchup.
Brainstorm done resolving. Fabiano will sacrifice the Misty Rainforest. It's a take on Propaganda.
Yep, just white Propaganda. And against a Delver of Secrets metagame, very powerful, especially one where one of the marquee threats is Young Pyromancer.
That poor monster behind bars.
Well, I don't know. It looks like, based on the skull belt and the 16-pack abs, it looks like that monster's up to no good if it were able to break out. So probably best served to be behind the cage.
I believe it just has a sense of style and likes to go to the gym.
Okay. I mean, the skull is, I mean, you can't think that's okay. You can't go out into public like that.
How's he getting different from anyone who wears an Affliction t-shirt?
He's the same. But, that,
those people aren't okay.
That opens up a larger conversation.
I understand. Here's a Liliana. Gonna tick that up. Sort of hard ice being discarded. Disfigure on Fabiano's side, and I've just been informed that Affliction has no interest in sponsoring the Open Series
Another
now.
sponsor down.
Yeah.
All right. I would love to come up with a list of sponsors that we can't get into bed with now. It's an exhaustive list.
Liliana does seem like a tough one for Taylor to beat.
Yes.
The ultimate is very real.
Every mode is challenging for this deck to beat.
Yeah. Perhaps it's Stoneforge Mystic time. Looks like it is. Taylor's going to go search, and Sword and Fire Axe was discarded, but there is a Batter Skull hanging out there, I believe.
And a Numasawa Chite as well. And that's where, you know, this is kind of a matchup where Gerard's style of deck building really shows, where he's just never going to be caught with cards that are too situational in this deck, and he's not going to have draws that have too many weird moving parts that don't connect. It's just good stuff. And so if he's able to blunt Joshua's early lock pieces, then it's going to be hard for Joshua to win the game, honestly.
Liliana going to take care of Stoneforge. There's a Creeping Tar Pit for Fabiano. And there's a passing of the turn. Trinisphere the draw here. And this is a little bit of the problem with the lock pieces in the deck, is if you draw them at the wrong time, Trinisphere, given the board state, may not have a huge impact on the game.
Oh, for sure. I mean, Joshua's deck at this point is full of cards like that.
Here's a Batter Skull. Going to dig through time in response by Fabiano. And give him a look at 7 cards. He'll take 2 of them with him. We'll see if he can find an answer.
2 copies of Daze, and he's already used 1. He does have a Chase the Mind Sculptor in hand and a Liliana in play, so he can work around it for a little while.
Counterbalance among the options here for Fabiano.
He also has 2 copies of True Name Nemesis, which, given the current board, is a fine answer to Batter Skull as well.
Those cards will go to the bottom. Batter Skull in there. Germ Token, I imagine, coming shortly. There that is. And Fabiano will move forward. Liliana slightly taxed here now. But a Chase the Mind Sculptor is a pretty good one to have against this deck. That'll take care of the Germ Token.
And I think that Gerard's just going to try to leverage one or both of these Planeswalkers into a win. I don't think he wants to waste his time dealing with Ghostly Prison at all, though he might get to a spot where he has enough mana where attacking through one Ghostly Prison is not that problematic. But these Planeswalkers seem like a very easy path to victory.
They just seem like very difficult cards for Taylor to get off of the table.
He can't attack very easily. His answers to Planeswalkers are Vanishing Lights or preemptive answers, things like Sphere of Resistance, Trinisphere, and so forth. But we've left that stage of the game, and now Joshua really looking at, I would say, Restoration Angel as his one good path to get at least one of the Planeswalkers off the table.
Cataclysm an option as well.
Cataclysm would be nice. There's 1 copy.
When Cataclysm was designed, Planeswalkers were not a thing. So able to take advantage of that. Stoneforge Mystic will search up a copy of Umezawa's Jite. So the equipment, there's plenty of that. But can a Taylor ever get it in play and connect is the question.
Show and Tell has the same templating that you just mentioned.
Yeah.
And now when they want things to be forwards compatible, they just list permanents. And when they only want them to be specific things, they just list those out instead.
Here's a Thoughtseize. Ghostly Prison and Umezawa Jite are the options here. Fabiano looks like he's going to take maybe the Ghostly Prison, at least pointed at it for a moment, but Jite might be the more threatening of the 2.
I just don't think that the creature combat locking effects matter very much this game for Gerard.
Time for Gerard to do a little brainstorming. Thoughtseize among the options here. 2 cards, of course, will have to go back, and since Fabiano does have a Delta in his hand, it can be a very good brainstorm.
And at this point, Gerard is just trying to be very careful about making sure that there's nothing that can possibly slip through the cracks. He looks like he's in a very commanding position, and he is, but he's still taking his time on these decisions because he knows that there's 1 or 2 cards, the Restoration Angel, the Cataclysm, that still might sort of matter, and there's no reason to take any risks.
Liliana going to take care of that Stoneforge Mystic. And Gerard's deck just demonstrating the power of Planeswalkers. We typically see this in Charlotte's Sultai, or at least we have before. Sometimes Gerard thrown in there as well. But this 1-2 punch of Jason Liliana, very difficult to beat.
And just also the power of having non-moving parts and good broad strokes answers. You get the feeling very much that Joshua has to cheat Gerard somehow to win the games. Like, he has to lock Gerard completely out of play starting on turn 1 or turn 2. Because once we get to this stage of the game, Joshua's almost hopeless.
And here's a Ghostly Prison, something that Fabiano does not care very much about. A Wasteland as well. Fabiano has plenty of lands. That Wasteland, of course, can tag a Creeping Tar Pit, but again, Fabiano probably has no interest in attacking.
I think that if he's able to incidentally deal with the Ghostly Prisons, he will, and maybe we'll start attacking, but with Jace the Mind Sculptor and Liliana the Veil in play, no real reason to rush.
Tropical Island does get sacrificed here. It gets put into play, excuse me, via the sacrifice Blue to Delta. Now here's another copy of Dig Through Time. Fabiano has really liked this card since its arrival.
Well, I mean, for someone who loves playing mid-range decks and control decks with a bunch of one-ofs, Dig Through Time is like Gerard won the Invitational. And he got to design his own card.
2 cards added to the grip. 5 lands will be untapped, and a drawing of a card. A Ponder here for Fabiano. Take a look at a couple, Tarmogoyf among them, and he will shuffle away very quickly. Does make you wonder when he will go into the Fate Sealing stage of the game here with Jace.
I feel like he will start Fate Sealing once he believes that Joshua has no relevant draws remaining.
Round number 2, you may begin.
Liliana will tick up. Fabiano will discard a copy of Thoughtseize, and now it's time to go Fate Sealing. Take a look at the top card, and he will leave it there.
And remember, there's no manipulation in Joshua's deck. He can't really shuffle his deck either. So Gerard can be very aggressive with this Fate Sealing, only really caring about, in my opinion, again, the Restoration Angel and the Cataclysm, and just letting everything else go.
A copy of Ghost Quarter was the card that Fabiano left on top of the deck. Ghost Quarter comes directly into play. Fabiano will draw. The elevator moves up on Jace to 6. And that top card may be staying on top as Fabiano is looking at a Restoration Angel, deciding what he wants to do with that.
Yeah, this is one of the few cards that in Joshua's deck that matter potentially.
It's just annoying enough that he's going to put it on the bottom. The 4 casting cost in Restoration Angel is what makes it a little bit difficult. A card like Abrupt Decay can't take care of it, as there's a Deathrite Shaman. Taylor draws. Looks like it may be a land as he's moving some over. But he will tap some mana here and deploy a copy of Trinisphere.
Nice. The lock piece is just a little late to the party.
To say the least. Abrupt Decay will take care of that. Fabiano going to continue to tick up his Liliana, it looks like, as he will play a land. There's a Snapcaster Mage. Here's a Ponder potentially.
Yeah, I think Gerard would probably be better served just using the Liliana first. He's going to be plussing regardless. So he could have played the Snapcaster, then plus Liliana, then flashback the Ponder. But this is fine too.
Yeah, this works out pretty well. He flashback the Ponder, puts top on top of his deck, draws it, plays it, which means he can tick up Liliana with no cards in his hand, Fate Seal with Jace, and pass the turn back. Very comfortably within. Very, very good board. A Savannah will come into play. And Fabiano will spin his top now. And ensure that no bad draws are coming for him.
You even got a Verdant Catacomb left over in all this.
Jace will tick up. It's on 10 now, very close to the ultimate. Liliana going up as well. Discarding a Brainstorm, that's how good his hand is.
Gerard gets into these spots sometimes where he likes just saying, you know, I know I got you. I'm not going to bother.
Oh, he's not wrong in this instance. But it's the 1-2 punch of Jason Liliana that have really had a huge effect on this game, and something that this Angel Prison deck is just pretty soft to, is there's a Mighty Sphere of Resistance.
Also nice.
I'd say a little late to the party, as Deathrite Shaman will.
Saying that about a lot of cards in Joshua's deck this game.
Well, they are very time sensitive.
Yep. It
is important for Sphere of Resistance and Trinisphere to show up early, not late. They have a shelf life on them. And if they show up here at the later stages of the game, after Fabiano has gotten things solidified, they are quite poor, as here's an Abrupt Scale will take care of a Banishing Light. Deathrite Shaman will return here for Fabiano. Liliana moves up, and we go back Taylor's way. Taylor will draw, and he doesn't want to play anymore. Gerard may be pointing out something that Joshua could have done there, as these two are pretty good friends.
Joshua could have ghost quartered one of his own lands to shuffle and gotten out of the Fate Seal for 1 turn. I think that's what Gerard was pointing out. He could have given himself 1 more shot at Cataclysm. Not that I think it would have mattered at all, but he can use ghost quarter generator shuffle to get out of a Fate Seal.
Maybe get a little lucky there.
Have to get a lot lucky,
I suppose. We'll see if that comes up in game number 2, but Gerard Fabiano does win game number 1 here over Joshua Taylor. Sultai Control up a game over Angel Prison as we turn our attention to the sideboard, and we will start with the Angel Prison deck.
2 copies of Aegis of the Gods, Humility, a Wrath of God, 2 copies of Timely Reinforcement, a Ratchet Bomb, 2 copies of Choke, 2 copies of Rest in Peace, 2 copies of Crozan Grip, an Armageddon, and Aether Soaring Canoness. I like the Armageddon in this matchup. I think Choke is good, but not great. Not a lot of great options here. I think it's fine to bring in the copies of Rest in Peace, as Gerard is using the Delve card drawers, Tarmogoyf, and Deathrite Shaman, but Gerard's deck has so many angles of attack that bringing in cards like Rest in Peace that are good but not locks really magnifies the issues Joshua has in the matchup, which is he's leaning very much on particular cards to resolve, and when those don't work, Gerard can work around his secondary locks. Like Ghostly Prison, we saw that game, Gerard could completely ignore. Rest in Peace has the ability to be a similar type of card, where it locks out a portion of Gerard's deck, but Joshua's already so far down on implied card advantage that Gerard can just win with Planeswalkers or True Day Nemesis or something else.
Other side of things here for Fabiano, he's got a Golgari Charm, 2 copies of Force of Will, 2 Spell Pierces, a Vendilion Click, 2 Surgical Extraction, a Pernicious Deed, that'll be a good one here. And now Spell Bomb, 2 Disfigures, a Threaten the Last Troll, a Hydro Blast, and a Blue Elemental Blast. Outside of the Deed, what else do we like?
I like the 2 copies of Spell Pierce, the 2 copies of Force of Will, and the Golgari Charm. I think Gerard needs to protect himself from Joshua's explosive openings as much as possible. The Golgari Charm also not too shabby against a deck that's bringing a lot of banishing effects to the table.
Well, both players will finish sideboarding up here, and we'll see what happens in game number 2 between Fabiano and Taylor. We see next to Fabiano, there's a 13 up there. He is number 13 on our Open Series leaderboard, but leading the pack right now is Joe Lissette, but it's hard to say for how much longer.
We don't know what IQ he's participating in or where he's at, but he did 5.004 yesterday. Pretty disappointing finish to fail to make the second day. We know that Jim Davis and Kevin Jones right now are in contention for the top 8, and just as we saw last week, like one big tournament can switch around the leaderboard. We may be looking at a repeat this weekend in Philadelphia as either Jim or Kevin or both in a good position to overtake Joe.
Yeah, Merriam is on the back burner as well with 155 Open Series points, but he's X3. And if he's able to run off 4 more wins, we'll see him in the elimination rounds most likely. Logan Mize, Dylan Donegan, Jeff Hoagland, and Tom Ross round out the top 8. 9 through 16 is where you'll find Fabiano's name. He's currently in 13th place coming into this tournament with 114 Open Series points. Van Meter, another tough legacy tournament for him, but he is playing in our Modern Premier IQ today. Jessup still grinding out some points here today, as is Brad and Nelson. And then Tenjum, Anderson, and Boswell do round out our top 16 players. All of these players who did attend the tournament in the top 16, 2 buys.
Yeah, that is the significance now and why these players need to keep playing, even if they don't have any particular designs for the Season 1 point invite. Is the top 16 can move pretty fluidly, and 2 buys at the Open Series is a huge deal.
So we'll see if Fabiano is able to move up and get by this match against Angel Prison. Gerard, of course, getting 2nd place in the Players' Championship at the end of 2014, and he wants to head back to that tournament. We know that.
I think he's got himself into a very nice matchup here. I think the style of deck that Gerard has here is really solid here. The fact that he doesn't have Force of Will game 1 means he is liable to certain the most explosive openings in Joshua's deck being a big problem, but if Joshua is able to find it, I think Gerard's in great shape.
Well, Taylor will be on the play here for game number 2. We'll see if he can get those lock pieces in place a little bit earlier, as if he's able to do that, life is pretty good. You see his hand, there's a Restoration Angel there, a Cataclysm as well, a card that plays a huge role in this matchup. Doesn't look like he has anything like a Sphere of Resistance or a Trinisphere at this point, but his hand might be able to play a different game and still be quite good.
Well, he does have Chalice of the Void, which he can set to 1, but Gerard's deck, a lot of copies of Abrupt Decay.
And you have to imagine that there's still an after sideboard, as they have a lot of nice targets.
Oh, Abrupt Decay is excellent against Joshua's deck. His deck all about 3 mana permanents, or 3 mana or less permanents, so.
Taylor draws a copy of Baneslayer Angel for the turn. He will play a Plains, and it will be a copy of Rest in Peace. So going to try to attack Fabiano's graveyard preemptively, though Fabiano does have a copy of Golgari Charm in hand and just drew a copy of Counterbalance. Fabiano will play Tropical Island, sacrifice the Misty Rainforest, and we'll see what he wants to search up.
I'm interested to see Counterbalance in the deck post-board here for Gerard. I guess he has a lot of creature removal that he wants to cut, but Angel Prison's a pretty tough deck to lock out because the casting costs are all over the place and go up pretty high.
He will deploy Naked Counterbalance, and we'll see how things do go here. Taylor will untap. It's time to draw. Copy of Chalice of the Void. He will play a Caracas and attempt to deploy a Chalice. Taylor, very nice guy, saying, would you like to reveal? And it looks like Fabiano has actually no interest in revealing whatsoever. Doesn't care if Chalice is in play.
Okay. I guess that means he's planning on using Abrupt Decay regardless.
Well, he does give away a little bit of information there on what the top card of his deck is.
Yeah, that seems to be innocuous to me in the scheme of things. A free counterspell there is, I think, worth a lot more than randomly revealing a card off the top of your deck.
Well, he willingly chose not to.
I think even if there was one card in my deck that could hit, if I was 1 in 50 to hit there, I would still reveal.
You also pick up with the information, too, about what your draw step will be.
Yeah. Though Gerard will have that information in a moment anyway.
Sure. Now here's a choke. See if he wants to reveal Counterbalance this one.
I think he's got a couple copies, at least one copy of Golgari Charm, so.
Looks like he will trigger the Counterbalance this time. And Abrupt Decay is the top card. So choke will resolve for now. But as you mentioned, Golgari Charm can do a nice job of taking care of things. And there is the charm. So Fabiano will untap and draw a card. It is Abrupt Decay, of course. There's a Polluted Delta and a passing of the turn. Both players making sure all their cards are exiled when they die, as Rest in Peace is in play. Taylor needing a 4th land here in a big way. Does have Restoration Angel in hand. There is land number 4 in Flooded Strand. So he will pass the turn back over to Fabiano. Fabiano will tap 3 mana. And this will be a copy of Vendilion Clique.
And the rest of Gerard's hand, just really solid removal that can play to the board.
Taylor will respond to Vendilion Clique by cracking that Flooded Strand, going down to 18. And he'll get himself a Savannah.
I mean, the click here is not going to be much in the way of pressure, as Joshua still has access to a Caracas, but still getting to see what's going on in Joshua's hand, knowing there's a good chance there's only 1 or 2 relevant cards, very potent here.
Restoration Angel is cast. In response to Vendilion Clique, Counterbalance will reveal a Polluted Delta, so will not get the job done. But Fabiano will sacrifice his Polluted Delta in the meantime. Does not want to draw another land. An island will come into play. And now here's the hand. We think.
Yeah.
Gerard says, I want to target myself. Please don't show me. I'll show you an Abrupt Decay. That'll go to the bottom, and then Fabiano will get to draw a card. Unfortunately, you see that sometimes with Vendilion Clique where players assume that they're being targeted.
Yeah. It is one of Magic's more awkward cards in a number of respects.
But it is a powerful one.
The name doesn't really imply that it's legendary. That's come up quite a bit that I've seen.
Okay.
And then the targeting of it, the fact that you are often stopping someone inside of their draw step, which is not a place where you normally need priority in a game of Magic. Fortunately, its power level is through the roof, so it comes up all the time.
Indeed. So we're back to Taylor's turn. Plays a Ghost Quarter as his land for the turn. We'll see if he wants to get into the red zone here with Restoration Angel or not. Looks like he does.
There is a hope here that Gerard just doesn't have any answers in his deck for a threat like Restoration Angel, or has very few. And with the Caracas pinning down the Vendilion Click, you can win a damage race.
Here's 4 mana. Chalice of the Void for 2 now.
And a Chalice on 2 freezes out a lot of Gerard's deck.
It does. Countermelt's maybe placed on the stack here by Fabiano, and it is. Polluted Delta is the card that is revealed, so that will not take care of Chalice of the Void. And it looks like it's into play. Oh, can't forget that Abrupt Decay cannot be countered, so. Fabiano will draw the Polluted Delta. We'll deploy that. Here comes Vendilion Click. 15-15 is now the score. And all Fabiano can do is pass his turn back. So Taylor will draw. Looks like it was a copy of Mox Diamond.
Another card highlighting the trouble for Joshua in the matchup. Once we're past the opening hand, not a very good draw.
Fabiano going to have 12 from that attack from Restoration Angel. And the big question here is Taylor willing to deploy the Baneslayer Angel? And the answer is no, does not want to get dazed. So we go back Fabiano's way. He'll serve in for 3. It's 12-12. Taylor, no interest in using that Caracas just yet. Windswept Heath the draw. Josh will quickly play that, attack for 3 points of damage. Fabiano's going to go down to 9. And now here is Baneslayer Angel with the mana available to pay for a daze.
Although being concerned about days here is a little bit odd, I suppose, at the end of the day, Gerard could always break the Chalice with an Abrupt Decay. But as things stand, the daze is currently locked out. But I guess the damage race is still so favorable for Joshua that it's worth taking a turn off and just being safe.
Well, Fabiano's certainly in a bind, especially if Baneslayer Angel gets into play. It's tough for him to beat that card.
Oh, for sure. That was actually one of the cards that OSIP used to good effect yesterday in their feature match.
Absolutely.
Out of the sideboard of Miracles. His removal spells are Abrupt Decay, Bulgari Charm, Disfigure. Not very good against Baneslayer Angel.
The top card revealed to counterbalance was a counter spell. Would be more useful if it was in hand.
Yes.
Though again, as you mentioned, Chalice is on 2, so that would be locked out anyway.
Yeah, he would basically have to blow up the Chalice, then blow up the Chalice on 1, then cantrip, then have the mana left over to Brains.
That's it?
Counterspell. That's all it's asking for.
Okay.
There. Not that much.
Well, Baneslayer is in, ponder the draw, but Chalice is on 1. Now, of course, Chalice is a trigger that you have to remember. But it looks like Abrupt Decay is going to go after the Chalice that is on 1. Abrupt Decay cannot be countered, though it will be exiled due to Rest in Peace, so Gerard will have to make sure that that is done correctly, and Josh will just point that out. And now here is a ponder. That is free to come through as the Chalice for 1 is gone. Fabiano is in a search for answers.
And keep in mind that if Gerard does not leave up 3 mana, that Joshua can simply untap, Caracas the Vendilion Click, and attack for lethal. So Gerard might just have to chump block with the click and then hope for help.
Little shuffle action here from Fabiano. Mystery card coming in, Liliana of the Veil, not bad.
Although, giving up the 3 mana here is a pretty big cost, though I suppose this still allows Gerard to either chump block with Vendilion Click or have it get bounced, and either is fine.
Restoration Angel's gonna bite the dust. And Gerard make sure that his Liliana is at 1 right now. Be a little more powerful if it was -1 kill a creature, or they sacrifice a creature.
Yes.
Just a touch.
So now I think we might see a second Baneslayer. Okay. I thought that it might have been Cataclysm time.
That'd be pretty adorable. Don't know if it's necessary. This Crocus to bounce the Vendilion. You can eat that Liliana now. And Gerard's in a world of trouble.
Oh, yeah.
This is the angel part of Angel Prison.
And it's so funny, too, because, you know, the Rest in Peace has showed up, really hasn't done anything. You get the sense that Gerard's probably cut a lot of his graveyard-centric stuff out of Third Rest in Peace. Chalice of the Void has done very little against Abrupt Decay. But just big flying creatures that cost more than 3 mana are really problematic for Gerard's deck.
Attention players, once again, we have two readers on the senior customer service. Your name is $200.
Like if Joshua had Sarah Angels in his sideboard, he would probably bring them in.
I think that's actually true.
Yeah.
Fabiano just has to pass the turn back. There's Vendilion Click, I believe, in the draw step. Frozen Grip was the draw. Looks like Taylor has some interest in casting that on Counterbalance. Counterbalance trigger. Abrupt Decay the top card. That won't take care of it. Need an interaction between Counterbalance and Split Second. You can't respond in Split Second, but Counterbalance is a triggered ability, so it goes on the stack.
Yeah, triggers still occur.
Sign up for 2-Minute Giant. If you'd like to sign up for 2-Minute Giant, please report to the sign-in station.
And they're going to come in. It's going to target Fabiano. Thoughts he's going to go to the bottom. Abrupt Decay is going to go to his hand now, as that was the card revealed. Here come the Baneslayers. One will get chumped. 5 damage will come across, and despite Fabiano's best efforts, I'm not sure he can get himself out of this particular prison.
I think if he has a land, he can deed for 5. That's his out. He would have access to 8 mana with a land.
Jeez.
So deed for 5 was his out there.
All right. Well, he did have a way out in that situation,
Yep.
even though I didn't think he did.
That's why he clicked himself. He was digging as hard as he could to find his 1 copy of Pernicious Deed, but was unable to do so.
Joshua Taylor going to win game number 2 against Gerard Fabiano. They're all tied up here in round number 12. Angel Prison and Sultai Control going to game number 3.
The big flying creature vulnerability is very odd because Gerard, it feels like, has a really dominant game on the board, but when those things resolve, it's an issue. He's got Pernicious Deed, but not a lot in the way of other removal spells.
The big Baneslayer
Still awesome.
showing up in more places than Miracles now. Pretty great.
The fact that it shows up at all in Legacy is a bit of a success for the format.
Absolutely.
Because there's a lot of things working against Baneslayer Angel, to put it mildly.
A white creature.
Wasteland.
5 mana.
You die on turn 1 sometimes. A lot of things working against Baneslayer Angel. The fact that it shows up in winning decks is a credit to the format.
We see Fabiano at this tournament. I think we're going to see a healthy amount of him during Season 1. We're going to be kind of in his radius. We didn't see him in Columbus. We're obviously here in Philadelphia. We see him here, and I think we'll see him in DC too.
Most likely next weekend off for the Fate Reforged pre-release, but then we pick right back up Washington, D.C., Legacy Open in Indianapolis the following weekend. Then the weekend after that, we will be off for the regionals. Head over to starcgames.com/regionals for more information. We hit Houston for the first time in Open Series history with a Standard Open February 14th and 15th. The following weekend in Los Angeles, the first ever modern Open Series in Baltimore. The following weekend, a standard Grand Prix in Miami, March 6th through 8th. Stay tuned to MagicGP.com for more information as we get a little bit closer. Dallas after that, and the Season 1 Invitational in Richmond, Virginia. Standard and Legacy, the Invitational formats, and a Standard Open Series with you, me, and Matthias in the booth.
Going to be a lot of Magic happening here through the first quarter of the year. Do plan accordingly. We hope to see you guys at any or all of those shows. We saw
All.
Yeah.
Show up to all of them.
We saw Joe Lissette last weekend in Columbus win. We did not expect him to. It was in Redlands, California. It's not close to Columbus, as you know. Neither is Philadelphia, yet he is here. He's looking to punch that ticket to the Players' Championship yet again, as is Gerard Fabiano. Wouldn't be surprised to see either one of them back at the end of the year.
They both seem very committed.
Had a lot of fun at that tournament, as did you and I and Matthias and everybody else.
It was awesome. In terms of what feels like the biggest professional accomplishment for me, it's still getting to cover Grand Prix New Jersey. But in terms of what was the coolest event to cover, what was the highest stress event to cover, definitely the Players' Championship, not close.
Stressful for us in the booth, stressful for the players playing,
Oh,
too.
yeah.
There's just a big ball of stress in the game center that weekend. But it was a lot of fun. Fabiano going to be on the play here after a very one-sided second game.
It was oddly one-sided because it felt like Gerard had the kind of draw you'd want. You know, the copies of Chalice of the Void never really did anything. He wasn't getting Wasteland locked, you know, none of the ways you would assume he would lose the game. Just Baneslayer Angel is a problem for his deck.
Verdict Catacombs does search of a tropical island, and there is a copy of Deathrite Shaman to start things off here for Taylor. Taylor going to play a Windswept Heath and simply pass the turn back over to Fabiano. Fabiano will draw for a second turn, picks up a copy of Force of Will. You see a Misty Rainforest and a Ponder in hand. See what he wants to get situated here on the second turn of the game.
Now, only 2 copies of Force of Will in his deck. And those are his only hard counter spells. And Joshua has a lot of things he brings to the table that require hard counters. So I think Gerard's going to be really judicious with the use of this Force of Will. He's not going to throw it away on something marginal. He's going to save it for something that really, really matters.
A shuffle with Ponder will net Fabiano a mystery card. And now here's an Underground Sea. And another copy of Deathrite Shaman. The first one will come into the red zone. Taylor's going to go to 19. It's all even up here. He'll bring himself down to 18, give Fabiano the lead as he searches up likely a Savannah. And there is the green-white dual land.
And these Savannahs in the sideboard, again, just enabling, or Savannahs in the deck, rather, enabling a couple sideboard cards, Choke and Crozane Crypt. Nothing in the main deck.
2 cards that are perfectly legitimate in this matchup. We saw them in Taylor's deck after sideboard. Rest in peace, the draw.
And a really good draw for Joshua here.
He's going to go with a Mox to start. There goes a Plains. There's a Rest in Peace. See if this resolves, as Fabiano's looking at a copy of Force of Will. It doesn't look like he has a blue card to go with it. And now we'll see if Taylor wants to fire off this Wasteland. Can really cut the mana here since Deathrite Shaman doesn't have any fuel.
Rest in Peace is really problematic for Gerard this game. I was wondering how much of his graveyard-specific cards he cut. For example, it wouldn't surprise me if he cut Tarmogoyf from his deck because of Ghostly Prison and the threat of Rest in Peace, but this draw right here, very susceptible to Rest in Peace.
Taylor just trying to figure out exactly which land he wants to wasteland. He's going to go after the Underground Sea as opposed to the Tropical Island. Cut Fabiano's black mana, leave him with some green, as Fabiano draws a card for his 3rd turn of the game.
And when Chase the Mind Sculptor the draw for Gerard this turn, if he still had access to his Deathrite Shamans, I think he would run away with this game potentially.
I think so too.
Now it's gotten way harder.
And you can tell the reliance on Deathrite Shaman here to generate mana and do it all, as it oftentimes does. Now all it can do is attack for 1. Fabiano still does have a land in his hand. He'll deploy the Misty Rainforest, and he does have an Abrupt Decay as well. So he has a way out from underneath this. So Taylor going to draw a card. Copy of Crow's and Grip. We'll play another copy of Savannah.
But the damage is already done to some extent. I mean, if Gerard sacrifices this fetch land, that goes to the exile zone as well. And then there's no lands in the graveyard to start with the Deathrite Shaman. So he has to continue to draw fetch lands, or Joshua has to cooperate, even if the Rest in Peace gets off the table.
Taylor just going to pass the turn back. Fabiano going to draw a card. No need to cast Abrupt Decay just yet. So he'll come across for 2 points of damage, put Taylor down to 14.
And I think a big reason for that is Gerard just wants to draw a black source of mana. If he does that, then he can cast Golgari Charm or Abrupt Decay on the Rest in Peace. Then the Misty Rainforest goes to the graveyard instead. Then the Deathrite Shaman makes at least 1 mana, and then he can play Jace the Mind Sculptor or whatever else his heart desires.
A Plains comes down here for Taylor. Getting close to a card like Restoration Angel or Baneslayer Angel.
And Elspeth in hand, another threat that's annoying for Gerard as it's resistant to 1/1 removal, outside of Abrupt Decay range.
Hard to knock down via damage too.
Yes. Now, the plus side for Gerard, Golgari Charm can be good in certain spots against Elspeth, so it's not all bad news, but still bad news.
The original Elspeth used to be kind of a legacy staple in Miracles decks and similar blue-white base control decks until they were given Entreat the Angels. But
Land still, various prison strategies.
yeah. Fabiano going to use his forceful removing Jace. That's big. Jace let him easily win the first game.
Well, I think he's so far away from casting Jace, and Elspeth's going to be problematic that he just kind of has to make that exchange there, even though it looks really rough.
An attack here for 2 from Fabiano. Didn't seem like an exchange he wanted to make, but an exchange he had to make. Keep Elspeth off the table.
Dylan Fabiano, please report to the stage.
And it's possible he's in this position where he wants to say, I want to make my bed with Rest in Peace. It's going to stay in game for the play for the entire game. I'm going to fight over other stuff and try to just beat down with Deathrite Shaman. And in that case, he does need to care quite a bit about Elspeth.
See what Josh can put together this turn. Still doing okay. 12's quite a bit of life. But this game has taken a kind of an odd turn. Both these players kind of jockeying for position. Neither one really doing all that much.
Yeah, and both players have to respect each other's ability to do things like on Joshua's side of the table, cast Wrath of God. On Gerard's side of the table, add Vendilion Click to the board. It's not easy for either side of the table right now.
Fabiano finally going to sacrifice that Misty Rainforest. We'll see what land he wants to search up.
And if you're Gerard, you got to be pretty worried here because what could be lingering in Joshua's hand? If it's a 1/1 removal spell like Banishing Light, that would make sense that he's not willing to pull the trigger on it just yet. But it could be Wrath of God or something similar, or it could be some of his 5-mana cards. Every time he moves into combat, he has to be worried to death of Restoration Angel.
I wouldn't be surprised to see Gerard do exactly this, which is go after that Mox Diamond so he doesn't have to worry about Restoration Angel when he's attacking.
And you have to assume that there could be other expensive stuff going on in Joshua's hand, like Baneslayer Angel. Perhaps he's drawn his Batter Skull. Cutting him off of mana seems great right now because, Joshua's not doing anything. So if he's going to continue to do nothing, you can hit for 2 at a time.
And that's exactly what Fabiano will do with those Deathrite Shamans. Taylor's down to 10. Fabiano just going to pass the turn back. Not even willing to play the land in his hand, oddly enough. Taylor with 3 mana will go with a Banishing Light. Seems like something he didn't want to do, but something he feels like he needs to do now.
And this may give Gerard reason to believe that Joshua has some sort of sweeper in his hand, where he wasn't willing to pull on the trigger on it just yet, but now that he has no guarantee of a 4th mana, has to answer the board. All very interesting stuff. But you also feel like if you're in Gerard's position, the current clock of 1 a turn with Deathrite Shaman is unlikely to get the job done. And I like getting the other Deathrite Shaman back here. Even though there's some evidence to suggest now that Joshua has a copy of Wrath of God or something similar in hand, 1 a turn is not going to do it. He's got to be back at 2 a turn.
I think 2 a turn is just enough pressure to force Taylor's hand, as there's a Misty Rainforest. Fabiano going to sacrifice that. He'll get another land out of his deck here. Looks as though he's got something to play. He searches up a copy of Bayou.
I believe Gerard may have picked up a copy of Liliana the Veil, which is a great draw at this stage.
And we saw just how powerful this was in the first game, and now it's going to tick up. And that's really going to mess with the way Taylor gets to play. Surgical Extraction is the card that is discarded by Fabiano. He is empty-handed. He is all in, for lack of a better term. And we'll see if Liliana, along with 2 copies of Deathrite Shaman, can get the job done.
Liliana is so good in this spot because Gerard is essentially empty-handed. There's a reason to suspect Joshua has a lot of high-impact cards in his hand. A lot of his best cards in the matchup are creatures, which Liliana also preemptively deals with.
The coast is clear for those Deathrite Shamans to come in. Taylor going to go down to 6. Abrupt Decay is going to go after Rest in Peace. That'll work just fine. See, they're asking Judge exactly where do the cards go. Abrupt Decay goes in the graveyard. Rest in Peace is exiled. Liliana's going to tick up. Crows Grip's going to go away. And those cards are fuel for Deathrite Shaman. So we might see Fabiano pump the brakes a little bit with those. Taylor going to play a copy of Stoneforge Mystic. Umezawa's Jite is an option here, as is Batterskull. But Liliana looks like it wants to take care of that Stoneforge Mystic as soon as possible.
Yeah, it's just that Liliana is so good against Joshua in this spot. It cuts off so many of his good draws and taxes his hand in a spot where all the cards in his hand are probably significant.
Fabiano with another copy of Abrupt Decay. He will tick up. Time for Taylor to discard. Copy of Umezawa's Jite. Gonna remove the Crows Grip. Taylor's gonna go down to 4, and attack will put him down to 3. Fabiano 1 turn away from moving on to 10 and 2. Taylor will draw. And that is gonna do it. Gerard Fabiano gonna win this match here over Joshua Taylor. Sultai Control will take down Angel Prison 2 games to 1 in kind of an obscure matchup. But Sultai Control able to make it out alive.